there was this young, he was a chiropractor in his mid-30s, excelling, making great money, making a great impact in the world. And he said that, well, I asked him the question, sat across his desk, and I just said, hey, I said, what is it that you want in your life? And he was speechless. And he said, Jerome, nobody's ever given me permission to answer that question. I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, I detailed that for me. And he said, well, my great-granddad was a chiropractor. My granddad was a chiropractor. My dad was a chiropractor. And I was just told I was going to be a chiropractor. He said, I honestly have never been able to answer that question for myself. So that's sad, but I think that's also a very real question. So the exciting part of that is now for the first time in his life, in his mid-30s, he's given permission, and that's part of what I love about being an executive coach, a success coach, a life coach, is it's all about giving people permission to think differently and to open up their eyes to what could possibly be. So I think a big part of this is give yourself permission to see a different future. Give yourself permission to see specifically maybe some of those things that you want. If you look at, the different dimensions of life, what do we want in our relationships? What do we want in the most important relationship with our spouse or our significant other? What do we want out of our career? I don't think people in their early stages of life go into I can't wait to work 40, 50 hours a week for the next 40 years. I don't think anybody's that excited about that because that's kind of autopilot, right? It's just the system. That's just how it works. And I'm not faulting those that do. I mean, some people can be very happy and very content, very meaningful lives lived in the structure of, an employment. But they never really had the option they may have felt like they were never given the opportunity to answer that question. So I think the first step here is to just give yourself permission to dream. What would this life look like? That's why I love seeing, as a sailor, I love seeing the different people on, YouTube that have chosen to go sail the world. They kind of sold everything and decided to go, to the rest of the world and make that their lifestyle. And I think that's totally cool. So you see, they're getting very specific on the lifestyle that they want. And here's the second thing I think is very important too. Before they start answering that question, they're already asking, how do I do that? Right? Well, how is never the first question, right? How truthfully, if we want to reduce how down, it is a fear-based question. Right. So if I'm going to dream of this life and this life that I had, okay, I'm going to have a house in Colorado. I'm going to have a sailboat on a beautiful lake. I'm going to have a business that makes this kind of money and has this kind of impact. I'm going to have this kind of freedom in my time, my schedule, my year, and maybe a couple of other things that I've added on to this dream life. Well, if I go down this thing, I'm like, well, how is that going to happen? Well, how do I get there? Well, how do I create a business like that? How is not the first question. Now, it might be the second or third question. So I'm not ignoring that how isn't a significant part of it. But the problem is when you start answering the what do I want question, the clarity question with how, you'll never have the answer that you want. Because you're going to start disbelieving it's possible before you ever set out to do it. Because you don't know how it's going to happen. And so when you give yourself permission, then I think the second thing that's very important is that you believe in the possibilities that are there, that you believe you will find a way to create the future that you want.
Yeah. Jerome, let's double click on that one because my experience when asking the question of what is you want is what gets in the way of belief is almost the belief that they aren't worthy of it. And so like, what have you found for people, right? Because just to be clear, there are people who you go, hey, we're going to go that mountain, and they just believe they're going to do it, right? It's just already hardwired in, right? God's given them that sort of hardwiring to just have like that self-assurance. But for those who doesn't come naturally to them, how do people have belief?
Yeah. Well, I think added to the idea of I'm not worthy, the worthiness reality that it plagues so much of humanity. The underlying that, I think, is I am not enough, right? I don't have what it takes, and I will never succeed. And I think those are three components of that are real inhibitors to people, because I'm not enough. So even if I dreamed this great dream, I'm not enough, which means I'm not worthy enough. right? So I don't deserve something like that. And I don't know that life so much is about what you deserve. I think life is about what you create. And so years ago when COVID hit, my wife and I hit the road in our RV. Business shut down for me I was speaking at conferences and events, doing a lot of corporate training. And for about a year, business almost came to a screeching halt, other than my coaching clients. And so we had time. We had liberty to go do whatever we wanted. And so we spent 8 months on the road. And I had this moment of clarity about 6 months in. And I was watching a Bert Kreischer, one of the episodes of The Cabin. Those are so great. But this isn't anything that Bert said. It was the first thing that came across the screen, because he has these little pithy statements, that little one-liners or motivational statements that he shows in his, on the screen from different times. But anyway, it was this. And he just said, the statement said this: life is not about understanding. Let me get it right. Life is not about understanding yourself. Life is about creating yourself. And that hit me so hard, because I think often we're trying to reconcile some of the shit of our past. We're trying to reconcile some of the heartaches and heartbreaks and injustices of our life. And we're trying to understand, why did this happen to me? Maybe I deserved it, whatever. We go through all the emotional, searchings. But that was something that lit me up that day, because it's like, okay, wait a minute. There is something to reconciling the past. That's very important. That's one of our 3 Qs we might get to here in a minute, but it's about reconciling the past. But that is very important. But it's also more important about what is the future we create. And so if we believe as human beings, that there is something amazing, something supernatural about our lives, that we have a creative ability, which I do believe every one of us have a creative ability. So we're creators. And so that means we have the ability to create the future of our dreams. But it's not just going to happen, right? It's not circumstance or happenstance. It requires some intentionality. It requires some bold steps moving forward. It requires us to overcome some of the doubts and fears and insecurities of life, so that we can actually pursue that. So we have to be the creator of our life.
It totally resonates with me, Jerome. This last week, I was out in LA coaching some entrepreneurs, and one of them, we've heard the statement, life doesn't happen to you, happens for you. But this entrepreneur took it a step farther, and they said, hey, I've heard this term, and I think we all have, life doesn't happen to you, happens. And he goes, on the other end, there's life happening for you. And she goes, but there's this belief that actually life happens through you, which is totally what you are talking about. The through you is actually the creation of whatever it is that you want.
Well, for me, the idea there is how we change the world, right? It's can I be a world changer? Yes, you can. To what degree is really the answer, or what we need to figure out. But everybody is a world changer. They're a life changer to somebody. And that's whenever we say, all right, it doesn't happen to me, it happens for me to flow through me. Right. So now, whatever my story is, whatever my struggle has been, whatever my victories and defeats and the glorious parts of my life and the inglorious parts of my life have been, those now can be used to benefit others. And that's part of how you redeem your story. Is, okay, my darkest day became my brightest light. 14, 15 years ago, I was leading a nonprofit organization. We were at the top of our game. We were hitting every metric of success for the 3 years prior to this moment that I'm talking about. We had 48% growth. The next year, 59% growth. The next year, 68%, 67% growth. And I'm talking year after year growth. That's very difficult to manage growth. But we were on the scene, man. We hit it. We struck the iron when it was hot. But that was also simultaneously when the organization was at the top of the game, I was at the end of my rope. That's whenever I was falling apart internally. I was decaying. I was struggling. I was hurting. And nobody knew about it. I was such a poser. I was such a pretender that my wife didn't even know. My kids didn't even know. My closest friends didn't even know. Now, looking back, there were certainly some indicators that were surfacing, because life will manifest itself. You can only hide for so long. But that story is a story now that I've shared with tens of thousands of people, audiences all over the world, where I from an executive leadership perspective, how I allowed my soul to get to a place where I found myself empty at a very scary place, because I didn't pay attention to it. So that story is what now threw me, right? So now it doesn't happen to you, it happens for you and to flow through you. I love that statement. I think that's a really cool statement that your entrepreneur identified.
Yeah, I mean, especially then hearing what you said is that about that, that pithy quote, right? It's not about, you don't have to understand life, you just have to create it. And it absolves the responsibility of somehow there's this burden of proof. You have to prove why it is that you want or what you've gotten that you've somehow need to justify versus just saying, no, like what's happened, is the past, right? And what's happening now and moving forward is all the gift that you have the ability to give yourself, most importantly, and to the rest of the world, right? I mean, that's kind of what you're outlining.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. And to circle back to what you talked about, the worthiness question for people, and this is one of the significant roadblocks to creating a dream life. And we're launching this new program now for midlifers, and we're excited about it. But I'm telling you what, this is my first time to be full on digital business, because that's primarily, it's like 95% digital business. And this is a new business venture for me. So it's stuff I don't know. I've never been down this road before. And I decided to fire before we were aimed. I decided to move forward before we were ready. And now, right or wrong, I don't know. But the truth is, I think the only way to really make stuff happen is to start aligning yourself and taking action in the direction of your dreams. And you don't try to have this all figured out. Have I messed some things up over the last 6-8 months of launching this new business? Yeah, of course I have. And I've launched a few, so I kind of know what I'm doing, but I don't know what I'm doing with the digital business. But if I'd asked the how question before starting this, I never would have done it. And so I think it's just taking steps to get past your worthiness issues, get past your, am I enough? Do I have what it takes? Can I create the success that I want? To just simply believe, well, you know what? I don't know yet, but I'm going to certainly find out.
Yeah, action is a really good clarifying agent, right? It when you hit a few walls, you go, I'm a lot more clear.
Yeah, well, and you're not going to have 100% clarity, by the way. When I say get crystal clear, it's get crystal clear on specifically, explicitly, precisely on what it is that you want, all right? So like if it's a boat, and this just makes it really easy to understand. So I want a 48-foot monohull Beneteau with a certain model and design, right? With certain features. I want it to have solar capacity, blah, 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 blah. Now I'm getting specific. Right now, I'm getting specific. How am I going to afford that? Depends on, well, what year I buy that boat. If I buy a brand new one, that's $600,000-700,000. If I buy one of 4 or 5 years old, that's $300,000 or $400,000. If I get one 10, 15 years old, it might only be $100,000. Well, I'm going to worry about the how after I decide I know specifically, precisely, explicitly what I want. And so this is where it changes the game, though, because now you have something to measure against. Because if you're opaque, if you're vague, I mean, it's like without a plan, right? Any path will get you there. Without a target, without a goal, any path will get you there. Well, that's true, except for it's meaningless. It's aimless, and you might get somewhere, but it's not where you wanted to go or wanted to be.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks for diving into that clarity. So
that's the first C. Right. So that's clarity. So this is setting yourself up for success, your life up for success, get crystal clear. The second one then is commitment. So once we are clear, we have to make commitments, because the commitment comes to protect what you've been crystal clear on. It's the protective measure, because otherwise opportunities are going to come. Life's going to get in the way. Life gets messy. Sometimes things aren't working like you want them to, and you get discouraged, you get distracted, and you start veering off path. So commitment is the second important element here. Get crystal clear and then make your commitment absolute. So a number of years ago, my son was starting a business. It was his first business that he was starting. He's 28 now. And so this was when he was 19, 20 years of age. And we were talking one day, and he said, and matter of fact, he wanted to drop out of college. I said, cool, no problem. In first year of college, he said, Dad, this isn't for me. He'd seen me launch a couple of businesses, and he thought he could do it too. And I thought, yeah. I said, I agree with you. If you're going into business, college is great, but I don't think it's essential. And so I said, but here's the deal. I said, you've got 2 months to go out and start a business, because you're not going to sit home, play video games, right? And he's like, okay, cool. Sir, yes, sir. So he goes out and he starts his business. And in the process, he says, Dad, help me understand how to be successful at this business. I talked to him about these 4 C's. I said, also, let's get crystal clear on what you're doing. And he said, okay, cool. Got it. And I said, and then let's talk about commitment. So I kind of explained it for him a little bit. He said, Dad, help me understand how to get to level 10 commitment. I said, well, son, when you were 15, do you remember racing? This was a desert race in southern New Mexico called the Corralitos race. And it's motocross basically, but desert racing. It's a 75-mile race. And my son's out there crushing it and killing it. He's leading the pack. I said, tell me how you engaged that race. Why did you win? And he goes, well, I just went for it, Dad. I just sent it. He's using all the whatever motorcycle language there is out there. I said, well, what you did is you full throttled it. I said, you can't tell me that when you were going around that course that you had anything left in your throttle. He said, no, I didn't. I said, that's commitment. I said, that's the measure of what it takes to build a business like you want to build. So what the cool thing about this is he was crystal clear and he made his commitments. 4 years later, he decided to take an early out. He had a business partner and he decided to sell his share of the company, 50% ownership of the company, had some money in his pocket at 24 years of age. So that's an awesome day, right? So, but he listened to Dad. He got crystal clear and he made his commitments. And so this is where I think people also struggle in not creating the dream life is because they're not committed to it. They want it too easy. They were so used to going to the microwave and pushing the 30-second button and poof, our dinner's ready for us. And that's just not how life works. That's just impractical. It's not feasible in business, in life. There has to be a level of commitment that you are demonstrating that is absolute. So when somebody isn't seeing the results that they want, the first thing I do is let's see how clear they are, right? If there's clarity, we have specific, measurable clarity. We know exactly precisely what they want. Then let's go to the commitment level. Are they absolutely committed to this, or have they been vacillating? Have they been wandering? Have they been dating other ideas? And have they been, in some ways diluting their focus? Well, if that's not the problem, so they're clear, now they're committed, then we go to the third C, which is consistency. And consistency is just the rhythm of life, the rhymes of life. That's how every single day we get up at a certain time. We do certain things throughout the day. When it's in business, we have a strategy. We have Mondays might have a focus. Tuesdays might have a focus. We have some system in place. And that's what the idea here of consistency is. It's the repeated behavior that keeps the locomotive inertia moving in our direction, right? The little engine that could, right? Chugga, 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 chugga. Come on, blow the horn with me, Ben. Toot, toot. Right? How did the little engine that could get to the top of the mountain?
I think I can.
But he did something beyond think I could, right? The engine kept chugging, right? He believed that he could, and so the engine kept chugging. Now, belief was the fuel, but the engine kept chugging, and that's exactly what has to happen for us to create our dream life. Consistently behaving, acting, aligning, doing what it takes to get the job done. So that is such a key factor for people here where they try and it didn't go easy. They try and it was too hard. They try, nothing happened, and they give up way too quickly.
Yeah. The consistency is compounding in action. And because I think the thing that people don't realize is that, let's just say, for example, you do 10 push-ups a day. Just, hey, I'm getting clear. I want to I want to not only be healthy, but I want to have a certain aesthetic, right? Develop chest. And, but what I don't think that people realize is that doing 10 push-ups, when you have done this 1,000 times, the 10 push-ups you're able to do on the 1,000th time is different than the first 10. It's the exact same 10 push-ups, but the quality, like the skill, the level, the difficulty is just different. And I think that's what people forget about consistency.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's one of the missing elements to the formula, right? And so get crystal clear, make absolute commitments, stay consistent. And that is, even if you're not seeing results right now, keep doing what you need to do. And learn along the way.
Yeah, Jerome, why do people avoid hard?
Because it's hard.
Is that just as simple as it is? At what point did we?
Well, I think because it takes an inner strength that a lot of people have not yet discovered. For me, I think the word for me is I've struggled for a long time between the definition of integrity and character, because in some ways they might imply the same thing, but I think they're completely different applications. For me, the character is the strength of a person's heart, right? And so what is their inner strength, their inner capacity to stick to this, whatever the regimen is, whatever the rituals are, whatever the rhythms are of life, that they stick to it to finally see some breakthrough. But what happens is, and I'm guilty of this too. I wish I could say that I've perfected all of this. I'm still human, but is that we go far enough and we stop one step short of the breakthrough. And the problem, we don't know where that breakthrough is going to happen, but we give up way too quickly. So we have, I think, a societal challenge of people are soft. I don't mean this to be insulting, but there's a lot of weak people in our world. And if it's going to require any kind of price or sacrifice, it's just never going to happen. So consequently, there's results to that. There's consequences to that, right? So you don't get what you want if you don't pay the price along the way. It's just that simple. Some people get lucky. I've never been one who got lucky. I've had to work my ass off. I've never had an organization go easy for me that I didn't have to blood, sweat, and tears make it happen. Even still today, after I've launched businesses and organizations in the past, I've impacted a lot of people's lives. Even today, blood, sweat, and tears to get the dream.
Yeah. I heard a quote once that when people say luck, but luck is actually when preparation meets opportunity. I can't remember who to attribute that quote to, but to your point, the consistency is the preparation.
Yeah. Yep. I completely agree. So 4 C's: clarity, commitment, consistency, and then the 4th C is courageous, bold steps to create your future. Right? So you can be clear, you can be committed, you can be consistent, but you're going to have to put risk into the equation to create the life that you want. Risk means I might have a career change. Risk means I might have to make significant changes in how I am living my day-to-day life. I might have to risk money to create the business that I want, to invest, to buy, to whatever I might be. I mean, there's so many things that we play it way too safe on. And of course, now I'm 57. My risk equation, what's the word? My risk sensitivities are different now than they were when I was in my 30s. I'd throw caution to the wind. In my 30s. Now I think I would say now I'm still just as risky. I just am a little wiser in some of the risks that I take. However, you still have to take those risks. And I've lost lots of money through my lifetime because I've taken risks. Last year, I invested in a company. I lost multiple 6 figures in a deal. It stings a little bit, right? I don't ever want to go through that again, but I've also learned something valuable from it. That will never happen again. But I was willing to risk for the return. And that's where that courageous, bold leadership comes in. That's the 4th part of the equation. You have to be that person who's willing to risk. And you might be risk averse. My wife is risk averse, and she married a guy who's nothing but risk. And so we've had to learn to balance each other and complement each other through 35 years of our married life. But you might be wired like my wife, where risk aversion, but at the same point, you still must find the inner strength, the inner heart, that character that says, I'm going to pay this price. I'm going to risk what I need to risk so that I can create the life that I want. So that's the formula, right? So clarity, commitment, consistency, and courage. And when somebody isn't seeing results, let's say they got crystal clear on the relationship, they're married for 20 years and they're wanting to take their relationship to the next level. So let's get crystal clear on what that looks like, make the commitments on what that's going to be consistent, and then be courageous. But let's say that this is not happening like they want it to. Let's go back to the equation. Where are we violating one of these steps? Because it's really that simple. Simple does not mean easy. Exactly what you said earlier in our conversation. Simple does not mean easy. So maybe you aren't as committed as you thought you were, or maybe you're not taking as bold of a step as you should be. So let's dial up the courage. Clarity's there, commitment's there, consistency. Let's dial up the courage. Or maybe the courage is there, consistency's not there. So you dial up the consistency. So now you have a way to measure what's happening and to align it for greater impact and greater success.
It's interesting when you were talking about how you lost the 6 figures. I think some people might say, well, that wasn't a successful deal. But I think you said something I thought was really, and you could almost miss it, because I think a lot of people are going, man, multiple six figures. Like, I think we all can imagine what that would feel like, and I think they get stuck there. But I think that the learning that you had from there was quite potentially 10x more impactful, because that'll never happen to you again. So I mean, so at the end of the day, that was an incredibly successful venture. It just was an expensive tuition.
Well, a very expensive education, that is for sure. But I can already tell you, yesterday, strategic financial decisions we were making yesterday, I have, and as we look to a 10-year, return here, a 10-year, whatever, scope. So glad that I experienced what I experienced last year with the loss of a decision that I should have, by the way, it's a decision I should have invited a couple of more people that know money better than I do into. But because of that, a decision we made yesterday in our strategic planning is going to produce amazing results over the next 10 years as we move forward. So you're right. I mean, there is the benefit to it. And by the way, if you're afraid to fail, you will never create the life that you want. You've got to get comfortable with failure. You've got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, get comfortable with things that don't math out. Otherwise, you're just going to play it too safe and you won't see the results that you want.
Yeah, I had put out a tweet. This is maybe going back a couple months ago. After being in a room with a bunch of entrepreneurs where we were doing this thinking exercise of bad decisions and indecisions. And you'll appreciate this, Jerome, but we actually took it a step farther. We did an accounting of the last 10, 15, 20 years, just going back through like the laundry list of all the bad decisions, right? And you're like, of course, it's so interesting. Hey, what do you want? A lot of people struggle with, but bad decisions, I got to tell you what, most people can like, right, just write them all down. And then we did the following. What about the indecisions? What are the things, the indecisions? And I put a tweet out. I said that indecisions are 10x more expensive than bad decisions. And what we found across 30 entrepreneurs was that actually what we actually deemed as bad decisions actually led to incredible financial success for the most part. But all of the indecisions, like across, I think it was easily, every person, when we looked at all of our indecisions, it was easily an 8-figure number that it actually cost us. So I love your courageous, bold action, but like to your point of what you're talking about in these, sometimes the fear actually has a huge, bigger tuition than your 6-figure tuition.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that indecision, man, I've been there way too many times. Something that we should have acted on, let's say 5 years ago. Why didn't we act on it? Why were we indecisive? We were insecure. And I think a lot of it, that is the root cause of indecision, is insecurity, right? So we're just not confident in moving forward. Yeah, but you never have. You can't talk to any business leader in this world that's been successful that said, yeah, I had 100% confidence this was going to go exactly as we had it planned. They took some steps and they had to make some mistakes. They learned some things along the way. And that's how you create success. That's how you create a business of your dreams, or a life of your dreams, or a relationship of your dreams. But when you stay in that valley of indecision, man, it can be a paralyzing place, and it can be a prison. And I fear that it keeps way too many people there for their entire life.
Yeah, where does ego play in this whole narrative, right? We've talked about fear, we've talked about lack of clarity, right? The lack of commitment, consistency, and bold, courageous action. But where does ego play in this, right? I think it's sort of the silent third party in almost all of our decisions.
Yeah, well, the ego is an interesting thing, isn't it? Most people think that they don't have much of an ego. And the truth is we're pretty much governed by ego, right? How much of a control do we have of it, or an awareness do we have? How much ego? This might be a new phrase, Ben, that we need to coin here. Something like, you got emotional intelligence, you got situational intelligence. Maybe we need to create a word, ego intelligence here or something, because my assumption is, and my belief is, and certainly my experience has been too, personally and working with clients, is that the ego is likely the biggest detriment to us if we don't manage it properly. because I think we also justify and excuse so many things out of maybe false humility, when the truth is it's actually another expression of ego, right? That we're somehow that inner person that we're trying to protect or we're trying to stroke, is always, it seems to me, continues to plague us.
Yeah, I see ego as this storyteller because I think at the root of everything that everyone is trying to be seen, heard, and understood. And more importantly, when you have those things, what they're really looking for is to be loved. Right? That's why when I think about like religion or cults or, like whatever it is, like people want to belong to something so that they can like have a word to identify themselves so that they can be seen, heard, and understood for their, I think the narrative that ego's trying to write.
Yeah. Well, I love the idea of the ego as a storyteller. I think that's a brilliant way to, to craft that. Because that's exactly what's happening. There's a story that is being told. There's a story that you're hearing. There's a story that you're entertaining. And I just don't know people. I don't know that ego has been given enough attention for people to realize how much it is, or potentially it is derailing their life or limiting their life. But that's where the worthiness aspects of it, I think, the competency, capacity, stories that we believe about ourselves come into play. It's influenced by that ego story.
Yeah. Jerome, I'm really curious, right? Because you obviously discovered this formula, but most people who discover things is they had to take a journey there, right? When you think about someone who discovered something of significance in the world, right? And we've seen all these Hollywood movies, right? National Treasure, right? Like they find this incredible thing, but it's only after this arduous journey. I'm curious, what was your journey to actually uncover these sort of awarenesses that like, hey, gotta have the clarity? I mean, my guess is you've hit a few branches on the way down. Can you share what that journey was that allowed you, and maybe kind of where you had the aha, like?
Yeah. Well, listen, everybody's got a story, right? We have a backstory. We have, if we looked in the rearview mirror, there's a lot or a lot of depth, a lot of context to a person's life and to a person's story. I would think mine, if I could look back, I think there's been one significant contributor to mine, and I don't know how else to define this, but pain. I am a pleasure seeker. I'm an adventurer. I'm an adrenaline junkie. I've stood at the foot of Everest. I've kayaked the Grand Canyon. I've sailed the Caribbean. I'm a dive master. I'm a pilot. I fly aircraft with engines and without engines. I mean, there's a lot that I do that I love. So I'm a pleasure seeker for sure. But where my lessons have been learned has been, on the anvil of pain. Pain of, stepping out, doing something a number of years ago when I had a nonprofit organization that I had founded. We started it from nothing, and we grew it to significant influence and impact in the state of New Mexico. And then also we had a few other places of under-resourced communities in the world that we were helping. And at one point we wanted to expand our reach in our local community. We were going to launch a satellite campus of what we were doing across town. And this was, it's a big endeavor. It's a costly endeavor. There's a lot at risk. There's a lot at play, but I felt confident about it. And I didn't have 100% certainty, but things outside of our control happened economically. I mean, like instantaneously or simultaneously anyway. Simultaneously, as we were launching this new campus, the finances just dried up. I mean, like in an instant. And it was embarrassing. I mean, because we had put marketing dollars into it. We had hired staff. We had done, what needed to be done to launch what we were doing. People knew about it. And in my opinion, it was a quick failure. It was so painful. And I remember somebody on my team saying, Romy's my nickname. And he said, I don't think you realize how much we were risking to get this done. So there was some pain, there was some shame, there was some embarrassment for me, and so that's part of this process. And then a few years later, as the organization is at the top of its game, as I mentioned a minute ago, I was at the end of my rope. We had amazing success. Everything on the outside was awesome, except for the inner person that I was having to deal with was not awesome. I was losing myself. I was losing my way. It was a dark, dark day for me, which is now my brightest light. But at that moment, it was very lonely. And I went through this process. In fact, in May of 2014, I went to the northern Georgia to a kind of a resort there, right at the trailhead of the Appalachian Trail, and I had to find myself again. And I had a hammock. I like cigars from time to time, so I had a couple of cigars with me, and I'm in this hammock, and it's springtime. The flowers are budding, the trees are budding, the little creek is running, and I just had time to unpack, decompress, and start walking through. And I don't know where these questions came from, but this is how I've created the life of my dreams that I have now. And they came to these 3 questions, and these 3 questions came from pain. They came from my successes, but they also came from my failures. They came from what was right about me. They came from what was wrong about me. And the first question that I had to ask was this: what am I chasing? So, I think a lot of people have an idea of what they're chasing. But, when I started this nonprofit organization, it was to do a lot of social good in the world. We wanted to make a difference. We wanted to help families. We wanted to feed, and we wanted to clothe. We wanted to house, and we wanted to help. And so, we were helping families. We were helping children. I mean, it was an amazing endeavor that we started with. But at some point, as my inner person started to experience some fatigue that I was not aware of, my ego kept telling me, I'm strong enough. Just keep pushing. Just keep pushing. Just keep pushing. Just keep pushing. So I kept pushing. And then, we started hitting it, right? We started getting recognized in the community, in the state, the governor's office, the mayor's office, other community. Right. It was awesome. I'm telling you. And then all of a sudden, it shifted what I was chasing. I will answer some of this question too with the second point of this, which is another question I'll ask you. But what I didn't realize is how much of my motivation was not coming from this altruistic place. It was coming from a painful place that I had not yet recognized, that I had not yet identified. And so, but I had to answer this question, and I had to consider what is it? What are you, what are you trying to accomplish? What are you doing? What are you chasing? I was no longer chasing my wife. Now, I wasn't chasing other women, but I wasn't chasing my wife. I wasn't chasing my kids. And this is the heartbreak of my life too. This was at my kids' most formidable years, 13 to 15 to 16 years of age. My daughter was the oldest. She's the one that suffered the most for my struggle. And I wasn't there for them. I'd come home. I was dad checked out, right? But I'd come home from the office or a hard day of work, and the kids would need me. Hey, Dad, let's do this. Hey, Dad, hey, give me a minute. Let me just watch the TV for a minute. So then I end up vegging in front of the TV all night instead of engaging, with the family. It's heartbreaking to me. So I'm deteriorating. So what am I chasing? Because I wasn't chasing the things that mattered to me. I certainly wasn't chasing my own well-being. But I did love the fact that we were in demand. I was in demand. Everybody wanted me on their corporate board. They wanted me serving. They wanted this, et cetera. So I had to really think through this. What is it that I'm trying to accomplish? And so there were a couple of things that I had to look at. The first thing I had to is refocus my attention, right? So here's 3 key strategies under this question. When you answer the question, what are you chasing? I want you to think about this. Refocus your attention. Where should your attention be? Right? Well, my attention had got diverted because of our success, because of our impact, because of the influence we had created. We had made some smart, strategic, steps and moves that really, I guess you call it, impressed people, whatever. And the organization was rapidly growing. So how do you argue with success, right? Well, I say you probably should argue with it a little bit. But so I had to refocus my attention. Okay, let me refocus on what am I really about here? The second thing that I had to look at is I had to realign my priorities, because my priorities were out of whack. My priorities were everybody but me, and my priorities with my family was further down the list. I was prioritizing the reputation that we had. I was prioritizing the growth of the organization. I was prioritizing things that I never should have. And what I found in this one was, to me, a struggle that I had, because, as a person of faith, anytime you give yourself any attention, I think there is this false definition of you're being selfish, right? So it was very hard for me to take this step. But once I discovered that was false humility is what I was being taught instead of true humility, I sat down to reorganize my life, reprioritize my life. And I determined that the number one focus that I had to have in my life was to take care of number one. And that was not because it was my ego trip. This wasn't my pride ride. This wasn't for me to just, to focus all the lights and attention on me. That had nothing to do with it, but I had to take care of myself. And it truly was about inner command and self-care. And so when I shifted that, and then all of a sudden now what I realized that, and this wasn't a quick fix, by the way, this was a period of time, but I realized I had more capacity to love. I had more capacity to give. There was more of dad for the kids, and more of a husband for my wife, and more of a friend to my friends, and more of a leader to those that I was leading, and more of a community leader for the community that I was serving in. And this one for me was so important because it helped me realize that you've got to take care of number one. And it's not about being selfish. In fact, to me, it's an act of selfishness that leads to selflessness, right? Because now I can truly be selfless because there's more of me to give the world. And that was a massive shift because everybody else had my attention. Everybody else had my time. So then the third thing that I had to redo, I had to redefine my success. And this is all under the question, what am I chasing, right? So refocus attention, reorganize prioritize my life. And then the third one was I had to redefine my success. And for those that are listening right now you're defining your life by your measure of your success, I'm telling you, that is an elusive, never-ending chase. That you will never achieve what you think you will achieve if success is your measure. Because success is a moving target. You just don't know it yet. You get there and it's not enough. You get there and you start saying, like I have, is this it? Is this what success really is? Because if it is, it's empty. So for me, I redefined success to a life of significance. And this, again, if I take care of myself, I can make a bigger impact in the world. If I make myself my number one priority, take care of me, now I can take care of others and serve others in a bigger way than ever before. But it took the spotlight off what I was doing and put the spotlight on helping other people create their dream, to create their life, to create a business of impact and influence. So that was a massive shift for me. But that all came from a place of pain and embarrassment. I mean, I was serving on the community, the Chamber of Commerce for the community that I was living in and leading the organization that was our home base of operations. And I was the president-elect. So I was 4 to 6 months away from taking the presidency of the Chamber of Commerce, which is a great position for an influencer, right? This puts you in front of people and opportunities in ways that nothing else will do. And I sat in one of those meetings and they said, Jerome, we need you to take this on. And normally and the reason why they knew to ask me, because I never said no. I never said no. Except for this one time I said, guys, and this was when the shit hit the fan for me. I said, I have nothing left to give. I said, I am sitting here right now. And I didn't get emotional, but I was very close. I'm like, I am done. I am empty and I need help. Never made those statements publicly to them except this. I said, guys, I don't have anything left to give. I can't do this. And then just a few weeks later, I had to resign from that board. Otherwise, if I'd have stayed in that position, it would have been a very, very bad outcome, I believe. I think it would have been an extremely painful experience had I stayed in that position. But I was willing to suffer the humiliation of, resigning from the president-elect position because I was at such a dark place. So all of this came because of pain, of my struggle. Then the next one. So the first question, and this is really helping people creating the life of their dreams. First question is this: what are you chasing? The second question is this: what's chasing you? Right. And so I think a lot of people can have an idea of what they're chasing, but they have no idea what's chasing them. And to me, and this is one thing I love as a professional speaker, speaking for conferences and events. And when I get to this question with an audience, this is kind of where the audience leans in. It's like going, huh? Right? It's like, okay, because they really don't, there's an idea here of where this is going to go, but they don't know where this is going to go. But the truth is, something is chasing nearly everyone. I haven't met a single person yet that didn't have something that was chasing them. And I want you to have a visual of a raging lion, a fierce lion who is coming at your feet, and you've been running from them. You just didn't know you've been running from it, right? You're experiencing maybe burnout in business, and you might be an executive, experience what I call, a number of years ago, coined the phrase executive fatigue. right? You might be that person right now, and you think it's the demands of the job, or you think it's the demands of life or opportunities that are being thrown at you. But the truth is, it may be none of those. It's the beast that has been chasing you, that you're running from, that has been wearing you down. It's been wearing you out. It's been wearing you thin. So this one was, I could never have imagined this was it for me. But when I started thinking through this question, it was very clear to me. This is why I couldn't say no. This is why I was such an over giver. This is why I would do anything I had to do to make sure you never rejected me or abandoned me or left me at the door. And it was because of my childhood adoption. I was a year and a half of age when the Wade family adopted me. Now, my biological family lived five houses down. I was born, birthed by a mom who was 17, 18 years of age, single mom, in a family of 5 other siblings with a single mom trying to take care of everybody. And this is the late 60s. There's not a whole lot of money in this home. They're all struggling. The family's really hurting. But the Wade family down the street started babysitting me basically from birth. And then finally the day came where my biological mom decided to give me up for adoption. And it was the best day of my life, right? But it was also the worst day of my life. Because the best day of my life, I was adopted by an amazing family, and Ray Wade was my best friend until the day he died 28 years ago. A family that had good morals, good values. The Wade house was a safe house. They would feed kids. They would house kids. They would take care of whatever you needed to come to the Wade house. That was the place. So, I mean, from that perspective, it was a great experience. But my soul interpreted that whole thing different, of rejection and abandonment and being left at the door. Now, none of that happened. But that's how my soul interpreted it. See, that was what was chasing me. So all of my life, I was a musician growing up. So I'm going to be the perfect musician. I'm going to be on point. I'm going to be in tune. I'm going to be that star performer. And so I always rose in the ranks because I was going to be the star performer. When I would get into my first business that I started working for, I was going to be a star performer. And of course I was. I didn't realize that this beast was chasing me through all of this. Right. And so it was so significant in my life. And then now I'm having to come to terms with what I had become because of that beast chasing me. What I allowed, what's the word I'm trying to use? What I chose to ignore because this beast was chasing me. So the first step in this is answering this question is to identify what is chasing you. For some people, it's a marriage that failed, right? It didn't work out for whatever reason. Might have been their fault, might not have been their fault. It doesn't matter. It just didn't work out. But there's something that they own to its failure. It could be something that has happened in their career. The boss derailed them. Some injustice happened at work. Some injustice happened in their childhood. Somebody did something very evil to them when they were a child. It could be a lot of things. Trauma, injustice, evil that has happened to us in our life. And if it goes unresolved, it will continue to chase us. And so the first step there is to identify it, because I think there's so many people driven in business that call themselves, visionary and drivers, and yet they're ignoring, and they might be true to that statement, except there's something else driving them that is kind of it's pushing them to be over the top, and it's that beast that's chasing them. So we identify it. Then the second thing is to reconcile it. And this is the hardest thing to do, because when you've messed up, and I would say whenever I was at the end of my rope during this, there was things that I had done. I had allowed myself to become less than what I should have become as a leader. I had allowed some darkness in my life, and I had allowed myself to be very emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually unhealthy. And I have to own that. I have to own that. So there's 5 words that I share with people, and these are simple. This is not rocket science. And by the way, Ben, there's nothing about me that's rocket science. I am a simple man. But I just said, you know what? I've got to let it go, and I have to move on. And I think the 5 most powerful words anybody could give themselves is to let it go and to move on. You might have had somebody do something to you that was absolutely ungodly and evil, that just maybe something I can't even imagine. So, what right do I have to ask you or to encourage you to let something go and to move on? I'm not asking you to let it go for them, for the other person who did this to you or whatever happened. I'm asking you to let it go for you, because there's no need for you to be a prisoner anymore. And there's no need for you to run from the beast that is trying to devour you. Right. So let it go and move on, because all of a sudden the beast in the past is disempowered. He no longer has power over you. He no longer has that fear authority of controlling your drive and your ambition and your motivation, because you have let it go. You have moved on.
Do you find, Jerome, that where people, so I love it, letting it go, move on, and not for them, but for yourself. Do you find that where people struggle in letting it go is moving beyond some sort of shame that they feel, like self shame? And if, the follow on to that is, how do people then like move beyond that shame? How do they like metabolize that shame to forgive themselves?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think shame is a big one, and like I kind of acknowledged there, for me, I have to own how I can't blame anybody else for what I became. I can't blame anybody else for the condition of my heart, my soul, my body, my mind. I can't blame anybody else for that. That I have to own that 100%. While I might have been naive and innocent, I still was responsible for that. And trust me, there was significant levels of shame that came. I was a public figure. I mean, I was supposed to have my shit together, right? I was supposed to have all of this together, and I was unraveling, and I unraveled. And so the shame part of it is very, it's very real. And I think too many of us live from a place of shame, that unnecessarily so, because a lot of times shame is trying to meet the expectations of another person, right? When somebody says shame on you, well, we didn't meet their expectations. And I guess anymore, I don't really care that I don't meet anybody else's expectations. My wife certainly has some influence. My kids certainly have some influence, but beyond that, I mean, it doesn't matter if I don't measure up. I'm 57. I'm not that far from being 60. So I'm just like, I'm at a stage of life where I don't know that my give a damn works anymore on that kind of thing. But I still have to deal with whatever voices of shame that I'm dealing with. So how did I do that? And I read a book at the time, and it's what to say to yourself, what to say when you're speaking to yourself. That may not be the exact title, but that's pretty close to the title. What to say when you talk to yourself. And because I had all of this inner voice of continued shame, continued blame, continued unworthiness, continued inability, incapacity. I mean, my self-regard was literally in the toilet. I took the emotional intelligence survey 15 years ago, and I literally, self-regard was literally in the toilet. Everything else in my emotional quotient was pretty high marks, but the lowest was my self-regard, which means I thought I was, shit. I just couldn't see good coming from me. And so I started to change the language that I spoke about myself. I started to change the words that I selected and how I spoke over me. Because the truth is, I couldn't ever imagine me telling somebody else what I was telling myself. My self-loathing, my self-disregard, my self-disrespect, my self-destruction, my self-sabotage. I could have never imagined that I would speak those kind of words to anybody in my life, even an enemy. I just can never imagine speaking that kind of language to somebody. But I accepted it from my own heart, from my own thoughts, the own voices of my inner battles. So getting to that place where we overcome our shame, I think we have to let it go and we have to move on. But note, as far as I know, Ben, maybe you know different, but as far as I know, there's only ever been one person that walked this planet that was perfect. And it's not me. And so why can't I just embrace my human frailty as normal? Why can't I give permission to myself to give myself, to cut myself some slack, to give myself a little bit of break, to say, you know what, life, again, it's not about a perfect game, right? It's not about playing it perfectly. It's about, giving it our best. And sometimes our best doesn't measure up, and that's okay. There's no fault. There's no meaning to it. So we have to take the wind out of the sails of shame. Otherwise, it will just overwhelm people. And I think that is a big beast a lot of people are running from, is shame.
I'm convinced that pain we often like want to avoid it, but I've been telling, like, this is how I've been telling myself, is that I think that, and I actually had this aha when I was in Italy, which you're heading to here in a couple weeks, is that going through Pompeii, and I was just, and it just struck me, there's like 27% of the city still left to be excavated, but you're seeing the city from like 2,500 years ago. I mean, they had plumbing. I mean, stuff that like, when you think 2,500 years ago, I mean, you go to like the early United States, they didn't have plumbing, but in Rome, they had plumbing. And so it made me just have this realization that the perfect version of you already exists. It's just the pain of the excavation. Like where, like, you think about how do they actually tunnel through? Like, how do they tunnel through, right? You got to use dynamite. And sometimes things in life are like your shit blowing up is actually just the excavation of the sediment that just is.
So you're changing the meaning.
Yeah, changing the meaning. And so I'm listening to like you and your story, I'm going like, that's incredible. Number one, I mean, but your shit blew up. I mean, in a pretty public way.
Yeah. Yeah. It was an ugly excavation. That is such a powerful metaphor that you're using right there. That is so good. That's empowering. I mean, that's the thing is, let's normalize our humanity. Let's just normalize it. What's not normal is the idea of perfection. What's not realistic is the idea that you're never going to fuck something up. You're never going to screw something up. You're never going to make a mistake. You're never going to misstep. That's just not real. And so let's normalize humanity. So let's cut ourselves some slack. And it does make it hard to be courageous. It does make it hard to create the life of our dreams when we're listening to the wrong voice. So let's just humanitize ourselves, right? We're human beings and who are going to make mistakes. We're never going to dial this in perfectly, but we can give it our best effort.
Yeah. One of my friends and peers, Lee Brower, he has this quote that says, "The enemy of thriving is arriving." And so to your point, I think that if we normalize as humanity, I think that this idea that we actually get somewhere is actually the death of your thriving, right? And I like what you talked about, changing this definition of success. And I think for me, where I kept chasing like these Everests, and you get there and you're standing there and you're expecting like this incredible moment, and you realize that you're, number one, often all alone. And two is that it was this pursuit of external validation versus this pursuit of internal joy. Right? Like, I mean, I'm listening to you and I'm going, man, you have discovered, you exchange this external validation with this internal, like, I'm going to put my own oxygen mask on first. And now you're like operating from a place of joy. I mean, maybe I'm misinterpreting what I'm hearing from you, but
No, not at all. Yeah, I love your Everest. Like you're at the top of the mountain, right? You just summited Everest. And here's the problem when you define your life by measures of success. You see the other peak over there and go, oh, now I've got to go do that peak. And then I've got to, and then there's another one. And that it just never ends, right? So that's why that shift to how can I truly leave my fingerprints of influence everywhere in the world? That to me is, I feel very good about that. I have stood at the foot of Mount Everest, and let me tell you, it is amazing. I was at 17,200 feet at base camp. I will do this again. I did it when, I was 50. So 7 years ago, I was 50, and the guy I went with was 75. And he's still living. This guy he's an amazing man. We've kayaked or rafted the Grand Canyon together, many other rivers, and we've experienced Everest together, at least the base camp of Everest together. I will do it again because it is absolutely a spectacular journey, emotionally, mentally, physically. It's an amazing journey, but it's all in part of creating that life of our dreams, which leads me to that third question we have to ask, right? So the first one is this, right? Is what are you chasing? Second question is what's chasing you? And then the third question is simply this: what is the life you want to create? That's what we started this conversation with. What is the life you want to create? And that's where you get explicit, you get specific, you get precise. You don't have ambiguity or vagueness to it. And where your opportunity lies is for you to give yourself permission to dream. Strip away the reasons why it can't happen or how is this going to happen. That's a second or third question later. The first question is what is the life that you want to create? And And when I was at the end of my rope, I started thinking very clearly about the life that I wanted to create. Well, I loved the work that we were doing in my previous nonprofit. I had also had a construction company prior to that. I envisioned what I'm doing today. And so what I am doing today, being on this podcast with Ben, what I am accomplishing today, speaking on stages, training teams, leadership teams, helping people create lives and break through some of their limitations and barriers. I envisioned that 11 years ago, and now it is exactly as I envisioned it to be. And this is a decade now into it, which is just a brief moment in time. When you look at the grand scheme of things, it's gone so fast, but this was the life I wanted to create. And there's 4 W's that I have defined that I think are very important for us to look at. And this is really how to set your life up for success. The first one for me is wellness. This goes back to aligning my priorities, right? What priorities should I have in my life? Your number one priority. I hope listeners will hear me on this. Your number one priority is taking care of you. Okay. You might be a dad. You might be a mom. You might be a business owner, an employer. You might be whatever you might be. And you might be a very important person. But your number one priority is taking care of you. And so this first W is wellness, right? And that is mental, physical, emotional, spiritual health, wholeness. Because I've seen way too many people in business. And I do think that there is a deep desire for people to be inner. They've got their inner life together. I truly think there is a deep desire. There are some purely external leaders out there that I just, they're not that fun to work with because they truly make it all about themselves. That's an external leader. But the internal drive for many is to really, of inner excellence. So wellness is the driver there. So what do I need to do then to take care of myself mentally? All right. So that means there should be some practices in my life that I'm doing, whether that's meditation or prayer, solitude, silence. I sit out in my hot tub in our beautiful mountainscape with, 40-foot pine trees above me. And I have my moments of where I'm just alone. And I allow my soul to decompress. I allow my mind to decompress. I allow my heart to decompress, to defrag all of the busyness of life. But so there's practices of my mental health, of the emotional health. What do I need to release? Who do I need to forgive? What am I still holding on to? That goes to a little bit of the beast that's chasing us. My spiritual life, again, comes back to, and I'm not a religious person. I think at one season of my life, people might have labeled me that, but I am definitely not that. But I'm a deeply spiritual person. I think there's a significant difference between the two.
Just as an aside, and this is, I've talked, I think one's an external validation and the spiritual is an internal validation.
Oh, so good. That is so good. Yeah, you nailed it. Yeah, you nailed it. And really the idea, I guess, with the being spiritual too, it's truly about the soul of a man. It's who are we at the innermost places of our being. So wellness is such a key importance for us here into creating our life or setting our life up for success and creating the life that we want. Because one of the things, as I've done many triathlons and events and et cetera. There's been places in my life I've been an elite athlete. And at those stages of being an elite athlete, there was something that I learned is that the better I take care of my body, which I do believe is a temple, right? The better I take care of my body, the better life just goes in every other way, sexually, relationally, professionally, parenting, financially. When I take care of me and that my body just is amazing, all of the other causal benefits that happen, from that. So wellness is such a huge driver. And that's why it should be one of our most important pursuits is taking care of number one. That's wellness, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual. And I even add relational health and wellness into that. So that's the first W. The second W then is wonder with an O. I have always been a very curious boy. My dad gave me a gift when I was very young, and we'd sit out under the cottonwood trees in Albuquerque, New Mexico on the starlit nights on this swing, and we would just talk, father, son. And I don't think my dad knew exactly what he was doing. He just enjoyed conversations with me, but he created somebody very curious about this world. And we would talk about different things and different desires of life and dreams and stuff like that. But because of that, I have been very curious to experience whatever this world has to offer. the natural wonders, the seas, the skies, what's below, what's above. And that's what has led me to be a pilot and to be a sailor, to be a scuba diver, to trek and to explore and to just see what this world has to offer. So we should live with wonder. And for me, it's just finding things that thrill and excite us, something different. Not everybody has to go to the base camp of Everest. And there will be some who want to go to the summit of Everest. Knock yourself out. That's actually not on my list. I will go to the base camp of Everest again, because there's just that sense of wonder that just makes you so full alive when you see that sunset in a unique place. When you're in the Tuscany region of Italy and you're seeing a vineyard and the sun setting over a vineyard, or it's the sunrise over a mountaintop. I mean, it's just amazing places and spaces to put ourselves. But it can be also just experiencing a new culture, a new place, a taste, a new coffee, a new bourbon, a new whatever it might be, right? So a sense of wonder, do things that excite you and thrill you. So this is how I feel is a map for people to create the life of their dreams: wellness, wonder, and then the third one is work. And I don't mean that in the sense of occupational, although it does apply to the occupational side of our lives. For me, it's finding meaningful work. Exactly. Is that I think you even used a phrase in previous conversations that what did you say? Profit for purpose
company.
Profit for purpose. That's exactly what this is. And that's this idea of work. I know it's a 4-letter word to some people, but for me, I love my work. I absolutely love the work that I get to do. And it's really not work from the 4-letter word sense. There's so much joy, so much fulfillment. When I have one-on-one conversations with an executive leader and I'm able to walk them through and navigate some stuff, personally or professionally, it's like, I'm alive. It's so meaningful. Plus, I also know that I've changed somebody's life. If just for the brief moment, I've changed their situation. But hopefully I've changed their life for the long haul.
Dan Martell has this quote. I just happened to come across it. And he goes, feels like play, looks like work, which is kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So finding meaningful work. And I still feel like even as an employed professional, you can find meaningful work, or you can bring meaning to your work. Your work might be a mundane task that you've done for 20 years or 30 years, which that is becoming very rare in our work days, our work environment anymore. But you can take something that's mundane and you can make it meaningful because you simply give it purpose. It might be those measly tasks that have to be done over and over and over again. Well, there's a greater purpose for you to serve somewhere in there. There's people you can relate with, connect with, things that you can do that can make that work very meaningful. So that's the third W. So we have wellness, we have wonder, we have work, and then the fourth one is wealth. And that is what we do to create a life, not just of means, which I do think is very important for us. And now that I am getting closer and closer to retire, I don't think I'm ever going to retire. I don't even know what that word's going to mean for me. I'm probably going to somehow still be engaged in impacting people's lives on one level or another for the rest of my life. But as we get closer and closer to that season of life where, we might choose to slow business down a little bit, that we're prepared for the future, but it also goes beyond means and preparation. It speaks to how rich can I be in helping others, improving somebody's life, improving somebody's situation, somebody's circumstance. And so it's me coming back to that definition of significance.
Jerome, when I think about, okay, if you focus on wellness, right, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, relationally, okay, you do those things and you do the your 4 C's, right, in terms of you have the clarity of what does winning look like for each one of those. You do them consistently, right? And then you make this like courageous action, bold action, and take action on that, right? And then you live in a place of wonder. And I think it's so funny to me that as we teach our children to become adults, and then as adults, we spend the rest of our life re-chasing that childlike innocence, right? Which is what you're talking about. Like when you have those moments where you see like this moment, I remember specifically one where I was with my grandpa, we're driving out west. He had this old white Mercedes diesel sedan, which I thought was so cool at the time. But we're coming around into Jackson, and it's dusk, and we're listening to Vivaldi's Four Seasons, windows open. I mean, it's blaring loud, and we have like this moment, and I think that those moments are the ones that I think I remember in my vague memories of what it felt like to be a child, right? So you're in that wonder, but then you're doing work, you're doing something that is driving like purpose. That what's the not the life that you're bringing through you, right? In the form of something that people can be impacted by. And then you bring wealth, which, by the way, I like that wealth is the last one. And most people think of wealth as like tangible means. But if you actually break down that word, the etymology of it, wealth is broken into wheel, and the th means the condition of, and wheel means well-being. So what you're actually talking about is when you actually have this KPI of well-being, the condition of well-being, and you talked about retiring. I think that so many people have been sold this bill of goods that like you go, you find, you work so that then you can enjoy. I think if you actually follow your 4 Ws, my question is, why would you ever want to like move away from that life?
Right. No.
You wouldn't. By the way, this means in terms of even if someone who's working for someone else. By the way, if you are working and you're listening to this and you are collecting a W-2 from someone else, there are a lot of companies that act just like Jerome, or even like one of my companies that literally allow you to live that existence. So just as an aside, but I find that the probability is zero, right? Like if you do your 4 Ws, and by the way, the probability of you dying early is also pretty low. I don't know. I think it's brilliant, Jerome. I think it's absolutely brilliant.
Well, what these give you too is now you're maximizing every moment of your life, however long it is that you live. My biological dad died at 63. My adopted father died at 67. Now people are lasting longer, right? That was 28 years ago that my adopted father died. But we don't know when our ticket's going to be punched, right? So why don't we live every moment like live it to its fullest, live it and maximize it, optimize it to every way that we can, instead of just haphazardly, half-assed, without direction, living our life.
Jerome, I'd love for you to talk about your newest project coming out, because I think like you've done this for executives, you've done this for like business leaders, like high growth and achievers, but you got something else that's coming out. I think is really, really cool, because I think it's a space that is not often talked about. Do you mind talking about your midlifers program you're going to be launching?
Awesome. Well, we're currently, this is my newest business venture. And again, it is the first fully digital business that I've ever done. What we're trying to do is create a community of business owning couples. What that means is one or both of them own a business. They might own it together, or they might individually own a business, but they're business minded couples, business owning couples who are seeking to really somehow reinvent purpose, to bring that sense of adventure to their life and relationship together, and who are connected to a community of like-minded people. So the idea behind midlifers.com is to challenge people where they are. Because for me, midlifers, the truth is 17 years ago, I entered midlife, right? Maybe even a couple of years before that. It's hard to say what the date is, but I entered my midlife, and my early midlife was dark. My early midlife was painful. My early midlife, I've admitted to it. I parts of me wished I had never gone through it, but the other part of me, I'm so grateful that I did. But there's so many people who are going through midlife just on autopilot. They've just hit cruise control. They've got to a certain place with their kids. Maybe their kids are in high school or college, or maybe they're empty nesters now, which my wife and I for several years now have been empty nesters, and we love it. It's heaven. We've got 2 very healthy, productive kids in society. One's married. Hopefully one of these days I'll find him a beautiful girl to marry. But so many midlifers are aimless. And life starts playing a different role. Ben, how old are you?
43.
Oh, you're just a pup. So you're the exact age I was then whenever I found myself unraveled. I was 43 years old. So, but the midlife can be messy. It can be confusing. It can be troubling, because stuff starts happening as we age, right? Things start, you start, I got a pain in my elbow today. Arthritis, other health conditions, heart issues. Stuff starts happening, disease, cancers, all sorts of things start happening. We have elderly parents that are aging, and maybe their health is not that great. So we're having to care for parents, having to care for kids, whatever it might be. So midlife can be very confusing. And our whole heart behind midlifers.com is to bring simple solutions, just break the complexities of life down into strategies, just like what we talked about today, into helping them. And I have a specific heart for business owning couples. My wife and I have been that for 35 years. We've launched a couple of for-profit companies and a couple of nonprofit organizations ourselves. My wife was very successful in real estate. I had a construction company where we developed and built high-end homes. That nonprofit, a couple of nonprofits that I've mentioned, that we did a lot of social good in the world. And so our heart really is to help them navigate this, because what I also found out in business, you tell me if this is true too, Ben, with maybe your circles, but oftentimes the person in business is the one that is typically growing. And it's the one that's not in business or not engaged in the business that is not forced to grow. And part of that is a blessing and a benefit. There may be stay-at-home mom, they might be the stay-at-home dad, they might be, they don't have the roles, responsibilities placed on their shoulders. But the one in business is always learning, always developing, or hopefully they are. But they're in some ways or form, they're having to learn new things to continue to lead and grow their business. And oftentimes what happens is their spouse or significant other gets left behind. And so consequently, they're no longer growing together. So what are they doing? There's distance that's starting to happen. And it can be innocent. It doesn't mean distance in meaning they're entertaining things they shouldn't be entertaining. It's just that they're growing in two different directions. And so I know that was the case for my wife and I. We were growing in two different directions. She was a phenomenal stay-at-home mom. Well, actually, she was still doing real estate, so she wasn't a stay-at-home mom, but she was still mom and real estate agent and other things that she did with her life. And I'm here trying to grow business and move the needle forward. And I'm going to conferences. I'm reading books. I'm getting coaching. I'm doing all of this. And so here I am growing. And my wife was growing, but just in her own way. And we just went two different directions. And so at some point, you want to reconnect when the kids start moving on their own, moving out, moving away. The question then is what do we do now as a couple? Because so many midlife couples get divorced because there is no purpose beyond their kids. There is no purpose beyond providing a safe environment for the kids. And I guarantee you there has been numerous couples that have said they've had the conversation with the couple, we're going to stay together until the kids are out and then we'll divorce. And so they already have this prearranged divorce coming 5 years away, 10 years away, which is just absurd and insane. But that's their choice, right? When the reality is their situation isn't going to get better in their next relationship, likely. Statistically, it's proven. So why not make the most of it now? Why not get intentional now? Why not bring purpose into your relationship right now? And so, with the idea of business owning couples growing in different ways, how about they grow together? And that's why this community aspect is so important. It gives them the context of us growing together. Now, on top of this, so we've got, what call it a membership community online, and it's still embryonic. We're launching it in the next 6 to 8 weeks. We actually are launching a program today as you and I speak. This is August 12th. I don't know when this will air, but we are launching a program today called Reinvent 2.0. So if the person goes to midlifers.com/reinvent, you can find an online program, an on-demand program that we have right now specifically for midlife couples to reinvent, to upgrade their life together, to bring purpose and passion back into that relationship. So the heart from all of this has been just from our own experiences. My wife and I 5 years ago sat down as my kids are now fully out of the house. And, my son's 28, my daughter's 31. We had kind of some we had some raw conversations about where we were as a couple and what we wanted for our future. And today literally yesterday, we celebrated 35 years of marriage and I was so happy that we have this life together, but we got intentional about it, right? Instead of accidental. And so when you're intentional, you create the future you want. When you're accidental, you create the future you don't want. And that's the facts. So so that's what we're really about right there is creating that environment where, midlife couples, business couples can connect with each other, learn a few things, grow together. We will have also in the coming, 6 to 12 months, we'll have a couples retreat that we'll be doing, and also some international travel. We'll just do. I'm like as a sailor, I take business leaders sailing, and so we're going to go jump on a sailboat for a few days or a few weeks and have some fun. So,
Jerome, if people want to know more about you, they want to follow your socials or read books. I know you have a book out and you have a book coming. Would you mind sharing with the audience?
Yeah, let me just encourage, if anybody wants a free copy of my book, I'll be glad to email you the digital copy of this. If you'll just text 719-480-2125, 719-480-2125, I'll send you a free version of this book. Then there's other ways to connect on social media. It's at Jerome Wade in every social channel there is. YouTube, Facebook, let's see, what's Instagram, LinkedIn, all of those. Yeah, it's at Jerome Wade. So, but I'd love to connect with you if there's any way that you'd like to chat or just follow me. So, and we post all the time on midlife issues now, on midlife stuff. So you'll find a lot of content that's valuable if you're in your midlife, which midlife is defined by many people from 35 to 75. So, if you're in that group, you definitely want to be a part of it.
That's amazing. Jerome, thank you so much for being on here. Before I sign off here, I always like to give the guests the last word, the last ripple, the last sort of echo. What would you have our audience kind of last thought that they would leave with and metabolize?
The last thought I would leave you with today is to make it your life pursuit to create the life that you want, to create the life of your dreams. I have this thing that's just kind of been playful, but I'm going to give you 3 simple things in how to create the life of your dreams. This is just added bonus for you right now. It's kind of how to F your way to maximum impact. And it's this: you've got to fight for it, right? To create the life that you want requires your intensity. So fight for it. Also, you must find a way. So you may not have the answers right now. You don't know how this is going to happen. So find a way. And then thirdly, figure it out. So fight for it, find a way, and figure it out. You have the genius, you have the competency, you have the capacity to do exactly what I'm saying today. Believe in yourself, trust yourself, and then go for it, because the life of your dreams is an amazing place to be. I'm living it right now, and I want that for you too.
It's beautiful. Jerome, thank you so much for sharing your just incredible wisdom, your lived experiences, and your frameworks. I know that this is really going to resonate with our audience, and so it's been an absolute joy to have you.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. It's been an honor to share this time with you, and hopefully we can do it again.
Thank you for listening. A big thanks to Elation Lab for the production and creative design. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Keep listening for more Max Life.